Hi, this is the Evolution Lab podcast, and I'm Matt Roberts. This is part of my ongoing mission to keep developing the optimum way to help people reach their goals, overcome adversity, and change perceptions about what's possible to achieve with our bodies. The Evolution Lab is all about being the very best version of you. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the podcast, and make sure you leave a rating and review. It'll help others to find the podcast to share and enjoy too. And now, let's get into the show. Hello everyone, welcome to the Evolution Lab podcast. My guest in this episode is someone who has a really good wealth of experience to talk about something which is close to, I think, most exercisers' hearts, the most successful, popular exercise and sport in the world, running. Everyone can hopefully do it, and it's available to, frankly, anybody pretty much. So lots to try and delve into, not just into how to stop, but really how to go beyond that into areas that are really tough. The guest is someone who's done various ultras over the years as well. It's Vassos Alexander. Hello, Vassos. How are you?
Hello, Matt. Nice to see you. Yes, very well, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm really good. Really good. Everyone's going to know who you are, Vassos. Vassos, you are the you're a sports reporter by background, but this is scratching the surface. You've been the sidekick with Chris Evans on The Breakfast Show, both on BBC Radio and on Virgin in the last few years as well. And you have reported on all sorts of sports over the years, from tennis to track and field, from diving to darts, full on diversity in there, which is all fantastic. You've got your own podcast as well, which is in relationship with Park Run, which is the amazing, is it a club or it's a movement really, isn't it? It's a whole thing where there are 2,000 venues nationwide that have Saturday morning runs, which are remarkable.
It's not my podcast. It's entirely Park Run's podcast. They're a bit like the UN Park Run. They ask you to do something and you can't really say no. I'm a huge fan of Park Run, which if anyone doesn't know, it's a free timed 5K run every Saturday morning or run or walk or jog or whatever you want in a park near you. And as you say, it's a movement. It's a charity Park Run, but they have 20, 30 people working for them full time, and the rest of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that make park runs happen every week are volunteers. They just give up their time. Well, not give up their time actually, because they get a lot out of it as well. Volunteering is a fantastic thing. So it's just 360 degrees of awesome, and a load of people have got a lot happier and a lot healthier thanks to Park Run.
I think it's probably one of the most successful of these kind of things I've ever seen. And it's run phenomenally well. It attracts everybody of all abilities and welcomes them in. And that's a really phenomenal achievement for all of it. The podcast, those who want to know as well, is called Free Weekly Timed, isn't it? It's available on all the normal podcast outlets and is well worth a listen for everything about running experiences, your experiences in there as well, which we're going to go through today in detail as well. Just to give some kind of color to this. I mean, you've done now, from my notes, and this is probably wrong, 50 plus marathons, and a whole host of ultras, doing Ironman and doing Spartathlon. What's the number of marathons you've done now? Tell me, how many is it? I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, you see, I actually don't have an actual number. When I first started doing them, I don't. It's if you include marathons and ultras, it's probably more than 100.
Because you only started 10 years ago. It's actually, sorry to interrupt, it's a small period of time. You've really nailed it.
Well, when was my first marathon? My first marathon was, 10 years ago. The 2012, I think, Barcelona Marathon. Maybe 2011.
Correct, 2011, actually.
2011 Barcelona Marathon. So 11 years of and I did the Great North Run in 2010. And I remember running in Beijing when I was covering the Olympics for the BBC. I remember I was the first BBC reporter in the Chinese capital, and the talk before the games was the smog. How any athletic event's going to happen in the smog? So I thought, and I got a camera out, and I thought I'll run 10K around the streets of Beijing, and I did that in I think 45 minutes. So I must have been a fairly decent runner by then. So I think I probably started running in about 2006 or 7. So it's about 15 years.
I remember being on BBC Radio with you, Chris, and I think at that point you were just starting running. So this is a while ago. I think that's got to be at least 12, 13 years ago. So quite a process to taking you and seeing you go through over that period of time, which is really amazing. Just to fill in some gaps as well on some of those events we just spoke about. We'll go delve into them later on, but just the Ironman, remind everyone of the distances you cover in an Ironman triathlon event?
You swim, then you run, then you cycle, then you run, you swim. 2 and a bit, nearly 3 miles, I think. I'm off the top of my head. You cycle 112 miles, and then you run a marathon.
Just for fun.
And
at the end.
yeah, it's fantastic. Actually, that was my first triathlon.
That was your first one. So you dove straight into, literally dove straight into the big daddy of them all, rather than going for a kind of small little sprint one of doing nice and easy and taking it steady.
I quite like that feeling, Matt, of biting off more than I can chew, and then seeing if I can chew it. Do you know what I mean? So it was actually not only my first triathlon, it was my first swimming event of any kind of note, rather than just sort of paddling about in a pool or in the open water. It was my first open water swim. It was my first organised swim. It was my first organised bike event. And the only bit that I thought I could do with any sort of confidence by then was the marathon, was the run at the end of it. And that was the bit that really fell apart in my first one, because I got the nutrition all wrong. And the marathon was a sort of 26.2 mile crawl at the end of it. Oh. But all good fun and all good learning.
I think when I did my first triathlons, I've done compared to yours, frankly, the baby ones, and the sprint version and just the Olympic one, and that's it. And the first time you do a bike race is the weirdest thing, because it's just fast. I mean, it's just very, very quick. And the problem is, I think when you're in this race mentality, you go off too quickly. So you've done your swim, you come out of the water, there's a weird head rush coming out of the water because you aren't quite sure what the hell is going on. And then you try and get onto your bike for start's an issue. Wetsuit off, shoes on, jump on the bike, chain comes off, and off you go. And it's a really strong buzz doing a cycle race the first time. And I found on the first sprint one I did, it was a 20K, only 20K bike part in that race. And you're just hammering. So you're going for like crazy, hitting the hills, pushing really hard, and then forgetting the fact that you've got to get off your bike and then use your legs to run. Just legs like jelly, super intense. That's the short one. So the Ironman, I dread to think. I haven't done one, and I've got to tell you, I'm probably not going to do one. But it's a really huge achievement. It's a great thing to have done. The Spartathlon, by not even contrast, beyond the pain barrier in my mind, tell everyone who doesn't know the distance involved in covering the whole Spartathlon.
The Spartathlon is it's a run in one go between Athens and a town called Sparta in the Peloponnese. It's 154 miles, 246 kilometers. They make it quite tough for you. The first marathon out of Athens, which is by no means a flat marathon, it's quite sort of rolling out of Athens. You have to do that in, I think, 3 hours 40, or they turf you out. The first 50 miles in under 8 hours, or they turf you out. So it's just quite tough to run. I'd never run more than 100 miles before I tried the Spartathlon. And, having run 50 miles in 8 hours, which is quite punchy, to then know that you've got longer than 100 miles still to run, and you've got a mountain to climb in the dark. It's beyond brutal, the Spartathlon, but I feel very, very, very lucky, honored to have run it, very lucky and honored to have finished it, because it's an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was working out the numbers, in fact, actually, before we came on air, and 246.56 kilometers. Who's counting in the last kilometer? It's there somewhere. 36 hours to achieve it, which means you're going at 6.8 kilometers per hour average for 36 hours. Now, the number itself, you ask anyone, okay, 6.8 k's per hour, doesn't sound that fast, but it's for that duration, just again, step after step, mile after mile. Of course, at some point in there, you have to kind of stop. You're going to walk for a bit. You've got to stop and feed, or you've got to go and wee by the side of a bush somewhere, whatever it might be. So therefore, your average has to, of course, increase when you are running. It's just an extraordinary thing. We're going to come back into that a bit later for a good reason.
You don't have to take all the 36 hours to finish it, but you can if you want. And I did finish it a little bit sooner than that. You don't have to sort of wait by the finishing line.
Actually, do you know what the fastest time is for that? When it goes past the post, what's the first person over the line?
There's a Greek guy called Yannis Kouros who ran it in something like 22 hours. But he arrived in Sparta. No one was ready for him. No one believed that he'd run it that time. So and he was like, oh, for goodness sake, I'm not gonna just make it up. I have run from Athens. You saw me in Athens yesterday morning, and it's now Saturday morning, and here I am in Sparty, and you don't cross the finishing line. You touch, or more charmingly kiss the feet of the warrior king Leonidas in the center of the town to finish. And so he came back the next year and calmly ran even quicker. I think 21 hours 40 something, which is just extraordinary, and the best ultra runners on the planet run Spartathlon, because it is it, and there's a race in America called Badwater. They are the two hardest, go in one go races in the world. No sleep involved.
I think also just the setting of the Spartathlon as well makes it particularly endearing.
Yeah, well, if we're going to get into it, it's a very historical race. You're recreating something magical, actually, in the dawn of democracy. But the greatest ultra runners on the planet, Scott Jurek, people may have heard of. He's broken records all over the world. Scott Jurek. He came 3 times to try and beat Yanis Kouros's record and just couldn't get near it. Dean Karnazes, the original or self-styled ultra marathon man, he's had a go. He was slower than me, actually, which made me very happy. But no, it's a wonderful, wonderful race. But you do find stuff out about yourself on those sort of unforgiving tarmac miles between Athens and Sparta.
I bet. All right, we're going to come back to that and delve into that part much deeper later on for sure. Just going back a bit then. So your first one was 2011 is Barcelona. And in your book, you write a really nice anecdote, which I think any marathon runner should read, and they'll recognize it inside out for when you first arrive at the start line of the things that happen and go through not just your mind, but also your bladder, and how you feel when you get there. So talk me through this first one, because it's a shock to the system.
It is a shock to the system. I certainly was racked with self-doubt. I just thought everyone around me had every right to be there except me. What right did I have to call myself a runner? Would I even finish? Would I embarrass myself? Would people laugh at me? What happens if you don't finish a marathon? What do you do? How do you get back to your hotel? Would I medically be sound enough to walk back to the hotel? What's the Spanish? It was in Barcelona. What's the sort of Spanish or Catalan ambulance service like? All of this stuff you sort of catastrophize. And then you start running, and away you go, having as you mentioned, the bladder. There is just this compulsion to go to the loo from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you start running, and I don't quite know what it is. I've managed to settle all the other sort of race nerves, even races that I'm scared of now. But this desire to go to the loo kind of constantly before you start, I don't know where it comes from, don't know what it is, but it always happens. And that was just another thing that shocked me before I ran my first marathon. You wake up, go to the loo, you go to breakfast, nip to the loo during breakfast, get back up to the hotel room, go to the loo, go back outside, nip back into the foyer and go to the loo again, get to the start line, you're thinking, where are the portaloos? It is extraordinary. And the thing I remember most about that first marathon, I hadn't really trained. I'd sort of got injured, and I think I'd managed 16 or 18 miles in the build up to that marathon. And I remember, going through 16, 18 miles, and everything was pretty good. And I'd started with my cousin just because I sort of followed him into that pen of people who were going to run at about 3.5 hours for the marathon. I had no expectation of doing that. But I was still there or thereabouts at about 18 miles. And then just suddenly, something happened, something switched in my brain. In fact, I saw someone pull out, sort of quite flamboyantly pull out in front of me. And then suddenly it was like I was running through treacle. And I remember this moment, maybe 2 miles after that, 20 miles in. So still 10K, 6 miles to go, a quarter of the marathon essentially. And we ran past our hotel. I ran past the open door of our hotel. And I knew that all of this sort of suffering, all of this pain, all of this kind of difficulty, all of it just went away if I just walked through the door of our hotel and went and, instead of running a marathon, run a bath and have a beer. And I sort of felt like I deserved it. And it was so tempting to just stop and just think, well, there'll be, I knew no one would care. Not my wife, not my kids, not really my cousin either. Definitely no one at work. It would be a bit embarrassing. Never mind. I got injured. Fine. But then something just thought, I sort of stopped and thought, I would care. I would care a lot if I didn't continue. And that was a very sort of big revelatory moment. And I go back to that in every race because I just thought, well, okay, well, if I'm not going to stop, then the only option is to carry on. If you take give up off the table, then the only other option is carry on. Is just put one step in front of the other until you reach the finishing line. And that really, actually, Matt, is all I've got. I don't have any running, talent particularly. I don't look especially or at all elegant when I run. I'm not that quick. I'm not properly quick. I'm all right as a club runner. But I do have that sort of determination, which was born on the streets of Barcelona as I ran past my hotel 20 miles into my first marathon of, okay, I've just got, don't give up. And that's all I do. I just don't give up. I just don't stop.
It is interesting. It's amazing. It's the mind games that you have to play within these things. Whatever the distance might be, whether it's a 5K for some people, anybody actually, frankly, what speed you're going, 10K, a marathon, an ultra, you have to play these little games all the time and remind yourself as the reason why you're doing these things. Would you say you're competitive as a person?
You see, I think no. But everybody who knows me, I mean, Chris Evans, who you know as well very well, would say I'm the most competitive person. He knows my wife, Caroline, who's in our kitchen currently, or in our...
we should get her on, interview her. Is he competitive or not?
She would say...
Wives always know these things.
Massively competitive. So I'm going to go with everybody else here and say yes.
Yeah. So as a child, were you a competitive child in sport, and was it something you were keen to? Was it an obvious thing? Were you super sporty as a child?
No, I wasn't really. I really wish I'd taken up running exercise earlier than I did, which is in my 30s, in that sort of slight vanity way where I noticed a bit of a spare tire through the middle and then realised that I need to do something about it. Is that going to be exercise? Is that going to be diet? Is it just going to get bigger? And then I discovered running, and I thought, I wish I'd found this earlier, because it just ticks so many boxes. Not just keeps the weight off, although it does obviously do that, but also the mental health box, and also the space and the time and the mindfulness. It's just so good for so many things, and I think it ticks lots of boxes for lots of different people, doesn't it? But I think it ticks all the boxes for me. So I do wish I'd found running earlier. Maybe the competitive streak came when I started running, but I don't tend to be competitive with other people. I think I'm just competitive against myself. I like to sort of be better than I was yesterday.
I spoke to Ben Fogle for a podcast in this series, and he's, of course, done Marathon des Sables. He's rode across the Atlantic, which is a bonkers event as well. It's insane. Yeah. He's done the sea down to the South Pole. He's climbed Everest. I mean, a whole litany of really good testing endurance events. And being asked a question to him, are you competitive? He swears blind that he's not. And it's all very much. And it's probably, to a degree, it's probably true, because actually what he's doing is actually competing, like you're saying, against himself. It's the will to succeed. For me, it's how I feel about what I do. And in some ways, that's a healthier place to come from than having to always try to get ahead. Because actually the pressure you build in competing with those around you is significant. And in endurance events as well, ultras in particular, that's probably quite potentially dangerous for some people. If it's all about you succeeding, almost being in the moment, enjoying the moment, taking on the experience alongside suffering with the pain and so on as well, then you can probably put one foot in front of the other and keep on going and going and going. Just go back to your training for your first marathon. So the first one you did, so you said you didn't train that much for it, or didn't train enough for it. What was your training for that first marathon you did?
It was a little bit haphazard, but I would train 3 or 4 times a week at that stage. I wasn't putting any speed work in. I was trying to build up the run to go longer and longer and longer and longer. But as many people who came to running, or hasn't always been running. I was in my early 30s, I think, when I started running. I got niggles. I just had to, my body had to get used to the fact that you run now. And I discovered something about pain this week, and you'll know this, Matt, I'm sure. Pain isn't detected in the brain. Pain is created in the brain, which sort of blew my mind a little bit.
Sure.
But anyway, I didn't know any of that back in 2010 or whenever I was 2011 when I was training for Barcelona. I just, I kept getting these niggles. My running gait wasn't what it should have been. I'd go to physios. I'd have shin splints. I'd have ITBS, runner's knee, iliotibial band syndrome. My ankles hurt. My plantar fascia hurt, the bottom of the foot. Plantar fasciitis, like they call it, the Geordie running injury, plantar fasciitis.
Exactly.
And And I just didn't ever manage to run more than 16 miles. And then I got full on what they call maranoia, everything hurting. And I sort of knew in the run up to the marathon, and I sort of knew that was probably in the mind, but I wasn't quite sure. So as I say, it wasn't ideal. I would say that you'll probably finish a marathon if you've done a 20-mile run before it, but 16 is a little bit, dodge.
I think that's about the threshold. So basically, that's right. If someone has run 16 miles, it's pretty hard to imagine you can add on an additional, 8, 9, 10 miles on top of that. It's too far to go. Once you've got to 20 miles mentally as well, you can sort of carry yourself through the remaining 6 where your feet are stuck to the floor. I remember my first marathon. I remember it was quite a warm day, and this kind of the drink stations at that point is either Gatorade or Lucozade sponsoring the marathon. And I swear my feet were sticking to the floor where people spilt their drinks. It was like this squelching noise and sticking noise. Just my legs were just dead, basically. So my motivation was actually in the last 3 kilometers, I thought I could just slow down. I could just walk a little bit. I'm really knackered. My legs are hurting. Then a chicken came past me, a man dressed as a chicken. And I thought, I can't get beaten by a chicken in the home straight. So to pick it up and beat the chicken, it's a ridiculous thing. But you have to, in a training block, get to a certain point, and it is about 20, 21 miles, and break that number psychologically as well, so you can then carry yourself through. And the crowd does carry you through to a degree. There is a certain point of that thing of just the people cheering you along. You've got to see people at certain mileage points as well. It does help you enormously. But having done that in your first one, because your first time, I think, was just scraped into the sub 4, didn't you?
If you're being generous, yeah. What I did, actually, I'm ashamed to say, was throw away my timing chip as I crossed the start line, because I thought I was racked with all these questions of self-doubt. I thought, well, look, if I'm going to fail here, which I probably am, no one's going to know about it. And so I took my timing chip away. So my watch said like 3:59 as I crossed the finishing line, but the big clock said 4 hours, and there was probably about 30 seconds. So I was probably just about inside 4 hours just in that first marathon.
Which is a great first marathon time, to be honest with you. I mean, the thing with marathon running is that, unfortunately, it's become a little bit kind of like, oh yeah, I've done like 5 and 10, and I've done sub 3 with 30, and because these figures get bandied around, and people forget how long a marathon is. It's a huge distance. So in the first one, to break 4 hours is a great achievement. It's fantastic. But going forwards beyond that, then, having got to number 5 and 10 and 15, what's your best time now? What's your PB for the marathon?
My PB is 2:59.
Yeah, so you've broken the magic barrier.
Yeah. The magic barrier for, club runners, up and down the country. I do, you say people forget, people say, oh, I've done 5, I've done 10, and I've done 100, say. And I was reminded of that a couple of years ago, of that, this is an actual marathon. Let's not be, take this too lightly. I was on the start line of a marathon, a hilly marathon, actually, at the base of Box Hill in Denby's Vineyard. And we were there in memory, myself and a few other people from my running club, Barnes Runners, we were there in memory of a friend of mine who we'd sadly lost a few months earlier. And he was just on the verge of joining the 100 Marathon Club. And that was going to be his 100th. So we were all wearing black ribbons. We were all wearing our club vests. And we were all there in memory of our friend Liam. And we looked at each other on the start line as the guy said, okay, we're going to start in the next minute. And we looked, we were so wrapped up in thoughts of Liam that we'd forgotten that, we had 26 hilly miles to run as well. And that really that realization, okay, hang on a minute, clear your head here, because you've got, a long morning ahead. And it is every marathon. It's not it shouldn't be, I don't think. And I have been, guilty of this. It shouldn't be you against the time or you against the clock, really. It's you or definitely not you against other people. It's you against the distance. And any marathon, I think any marathon finished is a marathon won.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I mean, you really are, because it's a huge achievement. It's a massive, massive distance. And the training block should always be respected as well, because the work you put in along that lets you hopefully enjoy the moment when you're doing it, because the worst thing in the world is to do a marathon and halfway around think, I'm just dying now, because it's just a long, long, long haul back into home from there. So having done your first one, and it was tough, but you got through it in a good time, to then go forwards to doing sub 3, 2:59. What's your training block looking like for that kind of marathon? That's a big shift.
yeah, that you train properly, then you get people involved, or you certainly get you get knowledge. You look it up. You people who have or members of running clubs who have sort of structured running. My cousin, I used to run marathons with my cousin, who's also called Vassos. And he and I, Barcelona was the first one. We used to go from city to city to city, one night little mini breaks, away from our families. But it was, one night was all we could afford. And we'd actually have a big old dinner the night before of eclectic local food. Absolutely not recommended, because you shouldn't eat something that your stomach might reject. But we sort of gloried in ignoring that advice. And then we'd run the marathon and fly home the next day. And sometimes we'd have to run in a certain time, otherwise we'd miss our flight home. I remember Ljubljana. He said, "Are you sure you can do 3.5 hours? Because I'm leaving from our hotel 3.5 hours after the start." And yes, so I would start doing, listen, if you want to run faster, you've got to run faster. And so I would start putting some speed work into my training. I'd make sure that, the long runs were proper long runs. But I think the thing that makes the biggest difference, yes, you do, tempo runs, which is just running uncomfortably hard for as long as you can bear it, half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour. Sometimes I did. You should do, some interval training, either fartlek, which is just sort of playing with the speed. I'll run to that lamppost really quickly, and then I'll jog for a bit, and then I'll run to the end of the street really quickly, and then I'll run a mile maybe really quickly, that sort of thing, or more sort of 1 minute fast, 1 minute slow, 2 minutes fast, 2 minutes slow, or that sort of stuff. I think the thing that really makes a difference, though, is to put some speed stuff. It's horrible. Sorry about this, but if you want to get quicker, do your long run, but run the middle miles quickly. And I think that, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, you got to raise your threshold levels, and you've hit all the right markers within that. In the interval training, the fartlek training, which is the system that's often used on a track, where you might do, it's a sort of a fast run down one straight, and it's a slow thing where you sort of slow on the bend, and then you speed a bit, and then you go fast again. It's that interval training, but constantly on the move, and that testing of your anaerobic and aerobic threshold, your lactic thresholds is critical for being able to go for longer. You're creating different use of mitochondria in your body as well, your energy usage production areas. So you're able to then access fat more readily, so you can go for longer rather than just burn away the sugar super quickly. So all that kind of additional training you need to do gives you the ability to expand not just your duration, but the speed at which you do that duration. So your tempo runs, when you're going for this, do I do 5K really quickly? Is it half an hour? Is it an hour? I'm going super quick for, where you're going beyond what you can do comfortably. No matter what that distance might be, that's all adapting and changing how your body responds, how your body uses that energy, and doesn't burn off the short energy too quickly. Because if you're out of sugar, you are stuffed completely. There's nothing you can do. You then get a crash, and there's really no way back. So your training plan obviously adapted and tweaked and changed in a good way. And that's a bit counterintuitive, because everyone assumes it's just go out there and run long distances and improve your distance, and that's it. And it really isn't, is it? It's got to get that higher intensity, that higher blast all the time.
Yeah, I used to come home. I raced myself home from work, or I remember, both at Radio 2 and at Virgin Radio. So that's 6 miles back from Radio 2, at 10 o'clock in the morning when we came off air, or 9 miles from Virgin. I had this particular, I would run home, and I'd eventually get into Hyde Park, and then I come through like Kensington and over Hammersmith Bridge, and there were certain sections I'd run quickly, certain sections I'd run slowly, or I'd just try and do the whole thing as fast as possible. But either way, I would arrive back home outside our house and just collapse in a pool of pain and lactate and sweat. My wife would say, "Could you just get inside? People can see us here." And, it was just, it's hard, but actually, funnily enough, it also makes your running more enjoyable, more sort of interesting. So I will sometimes, if I'm training for a fast marathon, I'll do all of that stuff at 12, 13, 15, whatever weeks. 16 weeks was my usual sort of block, including the taper. And I do these. The thing I hated most, I've got a track about half a mile from where I live down in Barn Elms, and I'd take myself there and I'd run 800 meter repeats, so half a mile, and then 400 meters jog recovery, and do that 10 times. And actually, it's a scarily accurate indicator that your 800 meter time in minutes and seconds, say 2:55. Translate that to your marathon time, your average of your 10 to your marathon time in hours and minutes, 2:55. It's sort of spookily accurate. But it changes it up. And then after an event, I would go back to just sort of pottering along and having a nice jog. And then after a month or two of that, I'm a bit bored. And I think, well, what happens if I just do a quick minute here, or I go to that lamppost quickly? And then you come back and you're really exhilarated by doing more kind of interval training, more interval running, getting your heart rate really higher. And then you start looking, well, might go for another marathon, might see what sort of time I can put down, or maybe even I think a 10K actually. I think a 10K is the hardest race. And listen, I've done them all. I run 5Ks, I run 2Ks actually. I run 2Ks with my 7-year-old daughter on a Sunday morning, a junior park run. And I've run up to 153 miles. So I think I'm pretty well placed to say which is the hardest race. And I think a 10K is the hardest race, because that's 40 odd minutes, half an hour if you're really quick, 50 minutes if you're not that quick, or an hour. But either way, it's a significant chunk at really high intensity. And I think that really stings.
Yeah, the 10K, the problem with 10K is that it's short enough to put every ounce of effort in and long enough to really hurt. It's just, it's a really good test. It's a very, very strong physical test. Perhaps my favorite of the endurance events, actually. That's about my threshold zone. I'm really bad at doing marathons. I'm an ex-sprinter. So it's the antithesis of all the things that I've been good at in the past. I have a real challenge going beyond about 20 miles. So I do a really fast half marathon. Beyond that level, I really struggle with trying to get really fast times. 10K, I love it. I can push hard and go for it. And it's a real attack mode, which is good fun.
It's funny, isn't it? It's funny how some people, are you're a sprinter, and I watch the sprinters. My son does long distance training on the track at Wimbledon, and we watch the sprinters, and they do 20 minutes of effort, and they look beautiful. Like the human form in perfect motion.
Grace to it.
Yeah, 20 seconds, sort of 200-meter effort, and then they have 5 minutes off. Whereas we're the other way around. We're doing 5-minute efforts with 20 seconds off, and we're so jealous of the sprinters.
Do a sprint, walk around, have a chat, catch up. In winter training, occasionally vomit now and again as well behind a lamppost, that kind of thing too. But it's there's a brutality to some of that beauty at the same time.
Yeah.
Having trained your training block to then going for this really organized approach and nailing it down, hitting the right markers, doing the interval training, doing the tempo work. Did you start to then look at things you could try to do to improve mobility, to improve on core work? Was there a strength input to this area that changed?
Initially, not at all. Eventually, yes. I would do. It was more actually when I started running in mountains and that sort of thing. I realized that plyometrics, just jumping onto a table or onto various blocks in a gym would sort of just help, because that's all explosive stuff. And I just thought I've just got to run quicker. So I had a very tailored running plan, 800-meter day. Yeah, they call Yasso after an American coach called Bert Yasso. That was Monday. Tuesday was easy. I'd run pretty much every day. Then I got to running twice a day. And it was only then, when I was sort of running 10, 11 times a week, that I suddenly thought, what if I did, change it up a bit? What if I did start doing some core work? And what I did was I got quite involved in kettlebells, because they're really good. Right. They're just sort of, the swinging the kettlebell from sort of between your legs and up to your forehead and down like that. And that really helps. And those are what they call Russian twists and stuff like that, and sit-ups and planks. And it does make a difference, because suddenly you're feeling much better in the way you hold yourself.
You and I spoke about this some years ago. So on one of the shows with you and Chris, we spoke about the work that you guys were doing in running, because actually Chris is now very into running as well, which is great. And you weren't doing any strength work at that point. I said, well, guys, you might need to actually add this into as a component, because there's a few reasons why. One is, skeletally, our structure, our posture requires strength. It requires some muscular strength. When you're asking the body to go through such a long endurance event, you need to have the ability to keep that skeletal system, the right structure, the right balance in place, besides anything else, because the joint movement needs to be efficient all the time. Any change in your posture makes the joint movements less efficient and more open to some form of repetitive strain injury, some form of tendonitis. So the strength component is important. The plyometric work you touched upon, bounding over boxes, bounding over hurdles, that kind of thing, creates micro traumas and the ability to then have strengthening in and around the bits, just in the tendon, connecting to the tendon, the muscular connection point. And that gives you a little bit more spring, a little bit more ability to cope with that explosive power. And each step that you take when you run is an explosive action. It's an impact thing. So adding those things in there gives you the ability to be stable for longer. Your plantar fasciitis that you had initially in starting running is all linked into that same thing. The rear chain of your body, the calf muscles, the hamstring muscles, the glutes, your butt's so vital when you're doing training for running. If it's not strong enough, your back and therefore down in towards your Achilles, your plantar fascia, all starts to get real stress. So the addition of that into your routine is probably saving you and making you go considerably faster.
Yeah, I've also noticed that it just makes me feel. So it's been the last couple of years. I would say that I've been doing actual weight training, but just for its own end, not just to make me faster at running. Because I sort of think, and I'm sort of fine with the fact that my fastest running days are behind me. Maybe physically, if I really set my mind to it, I might be able to run a 250. Well, certainly now with the new shoes, a 255 or a
2.5 hours now,
yeah, exactly. I think you should have little asterisks. I was sub 3
Definitely.
before the Vaporfly. But I'm sort of fine with it. Like almost certainly the last time I saw you, I'd have been wearing a running watch of some sort. But now look, I haven't got no watch on me at all.
Wow.
I run by feel, and I run by just how about an hour or about 2 hours or about half an hour, and I'm loving that. So I'm not really sort of into sort of breaking times or that sort of thing, but I am still into going very, very long distances. But I feel so much better, So 3 times a week, without fail, I will do some weight training, some proper weight training. I will do deadlifts and squats and chest presses and rows and all sorts of things and shoulder work, and I feel so much better for it. I feel fitter now than when I was at my absolute, peak fitness, running 100 miles in 16 hours. I'm in better shape now. And also added some cold water swimming, which is really, I think, fantastic for the brain, if nothing else. And I think I'm certainly, I feel as fit as I've ever felt, although I'm probably not as quick as I've ever been.
So there's a range of studies involved around the endurance training, especially at high levels. When you go for this really stuff that you've been doing, the very high end stuff, which is pretty quick and it's quite long, very long. There's an interleukin response, this protein response in your body, which is an inflammatory response. And there's interleukins that make it anti-inflammatory, some make it inflammatory. And the inflammatory version of that at this high end is quite significant, both in terms of making your body inflamed and therefore our brain function become a bit foggy. There's a link to our vagus nerve connecting your gut to your brain, which gets impaired slightly as well. And we struggle with it. And it's linked into this. It's not linked into cancer per se in terms of causing cancer, but it's one thing that if someone is suffering with cancer, you want to try and bring these interleukin levels down to be really controlled and have then a response which can recover more quickly. And running is very, very, very good at bringing down inflammatory levels if you do it in the right way. Now, what you've done is you've gone through all the hard stuff. It's great. We have to do this stuff because it's a good challenge to go for. But you've now changed your routine into one that's really healthy. It's a really good blend because you've got the right challenge you need on the resistance training side. So your structure is good. Resistance training, weight training has an anti-inflammatory effect. Again, counterintuitive, funny enough. Your running isn't as extreme as it was. It's at a level, I suspect, now where you've got this inflammatory approach, which is coming down. You've hit a nice sweet spot in getting the cardio system working well, inflammation under check. You've got your strength to be good, posture to be good. You probably are in better shape than you've ever been. And you're now 46, I think. So, we're at a point, I'm 48, we're at a point where we have to make sure we keep these things very much in check and in place, because this is where we can start to be healthy for 10 and 20 years going forward. So what you've done is, whether you planned it or not, you've done the right things.
It's you I have to thank for it. I'm just going to interrupt you there because I do have you to thank for it, because you came in and you said you should be doing some resistance training. You're over 40 now. I think we'd only just moved to Virgin, so this would have been 3.5 years ago. And I did, and It was just, again, another sort of light bulb moment. I suddenly realized I loved this stuff. As soon as I stopped trying to sort of, muscle it up any old way, and I was using my jaw almost much more than anything else. As soon as I just started realizing that if I needed to use my chest muscles, I need to use my chest muscles. I feel so good for it. So thank you, Matt. That's awesome. You come in, you might think this is all sort of showbiz froth, but it isn't. And I have you to thank for it. So thank you.
Well, that's why I look to see you guys. Actually, whenever I come in, it's not showbiz froth. And you guys always genuinely are really keen on the subject. And Chris is always he's a good probe for these things. And again, not for the create and story. It's just because he's keen. He's just interested as well. You both are. It's fantastic. And when it came to see you, actually, we did this very unfairly live on air, taking your blood. And then we did an analysis, came back to you and gave you testosterone levels, one of the key things that guys always need to look at. And your levels for both of you weren't as high as we'd like them to be. And that's for lots of reasons. One is that you're doing, both of you, lots and lots of the running work on its own. The nature of your job, you're up really early in the morning for the radio show, and therefore you're going to have, maybe a short night's sleep or broken night's sleep. You've both got young children. You're working really hard. We all do the same sort of things. And we have to be careful that we don't let those levels drop down. And yours was funny because your level was fine, but you were blocking it. Your body was not letting you use testosterone that you had present. So you were making it, but you weren't able to physically use it. I bet, and we should test you again at some point, I bet your usable level has grown because you've taken down some of the intensity, the duration of the running. You've increased on that resistance training, which is great. Therefore, this inflammatory effect will be under control. And I would guarantee you're going to have a level of testosterone now which is being used, which is higher. Hence why you're feeling fitter, more energized, probably mentally clearer as well, I suspect, and all the right things all going on. So, you put the work in. It's great. It's nice to inspire someone that started that. That's great. But you have to put the work in, and you have, and you changed it all in a good way. The cold water stuff is interesting as well, because besides that being just an interesting challenge to do, physically, the cold water effect on your body gives your DNA a shock. We need, as systems, shocks. We need to have some adversity. And then we grow, we redevelop, we have human growth hormone responses, which are really significant. When do you do that? How often do you do that? How long do you do that for?
I go every single morning to the Serpentine, which is a lake in the middle of Hyde Park. If you're a member of the swim club, you can swim in there. There's certain areas where you can swim. It's actually slightly outside the Lido area, which is open to the public in the summer. Every morning between 5 and 9:30. So if I go on my way to work, which I do, I'm in there every single morning, Monday to Friday at 5 o'clock. And then usually I'll swim. We've got a little place by the sea in Kent, in Whitstable. So either in the sea, in the North Sea in Whitstable, or in the Thames near where I live in Teddington in the weekend. So pretty much 5 or 6 days a week, I am in cold water. And you know what, Matt? People are saying, so Chris was saying this morning, he just sort of feels that winter is mellowing into spring. And I was thinking, yes, fine, but I'm really going to miss, because when the temperature of the water is below 5 degrees, that's when you get the real va-va-voom from it. And I'm going to miss that. And I sort of hope, and I know I'm alone in this, but I sort of hope that we have one more kind of proper week or 10 days of really icy weather, because the lowest the Serpentine has been this winter is like 2.9 or something degrees. And we haven't had a 1 degree or a 0 degree in the 2 years that I've been cold water swimming. We had 1 degree when the Thames froze at Teddington in 2021. So a year ago now, it was 1.9 degrees. That's as cold as I've got. But I was sort of hoping to get colder this year. Nothing doing, but it is lovely. I would say I swim 300 or 400 meters in the coldest water. I don't wear gloves. I don't wear a hat actually now. And I don't wear socks, and I really love it. Although, it hurts.
It does. For people listening to this, actually, one thing that, this is an extreme version of it, try and jump into a lake and go swimming in the morning. And people do this actually down in Antarctica. I've got, in fact, friends going down there as we speak right now. And there's talk of going and jumping in the water down there and swimming around for, not very long. It's going to be 60 seconds at most in there. Super, super, super cold, clearly. But again, the effect on your body is this negative temperature change is a positive shock. And one way someone listening to this can do it without going to quite that extreme degree is having a cold shower. Genuinely having a cold shower for 4 or 5 minutes. It's quite a long time. Have it as cold as it can go. and you stay in the shower for 4 or 5 minutes and do box breathing. Have you tried doing box breathing? So breathing
Yeah,
techniques.
4 in, 4 hold, 4 out,
Yeah.
4 hold. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is what the Navy SEALs use, is when they get planted somewhere, they calm themselves down by using that. Calms your heart rate, improves your HRV, your heart rate variability, this flex your heart has in each beat. And in doing that, we calm ourselves. And actually, after a minute or two in a cold shower, you actually don't really think about it being that cold. People find that hard to believe, but you really don't. And after a few minutes, it's just as another thing. And that panting you get at the start, which is actually good for you, your body's trying to react, it calms down and goes away as well. And that's a really good way you can just calm your system and really give your heart a chance to adapt in a really positive way. People sleep better for it. They recover better from exercise for it. It's a really great thing to do, as being an alternative to going jumping in the Serpentine on a cold Tuesday morning.
Yes, in the dark with all the goose poo everywhere. Yeah, no, I know that is extreme. The one way can I sort of add to what you've just said? Because I started with the cold showers. Wim Hof, you'll know Wim Hof, of course, the Iceman. He came in and he's a big advocate of cold water and breathing, actually. And I started when I met him. I started doing the cold showers, and it's really easy. It might sound difficult, but just don't think I'm going for a cold shower. Go into your normal shower, wash your hair, wash yourself, enjoy your nice warm shower, and then just turn the knob to cold. It doesn't happen instantly. There's always a lag. So you're not, you're sort of, it doesn't sort of feel as hard as it's going to be. Then there's the cold shock, but then just breathe. You can extend, start with 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and extend it to a couple of minutes, and 3 and 4 and 5 if you can. But it's not as hard as it sounds, because all you're doing, you're not like me diving into a freezing cold lake. You're going into a nice warm shower like you always do. But just at the end, turn the tap, and it's sort of. Do you remember in Friends when one of them, I presume Chandler, was going to get married? And he was panicking because he's a commitment phobe. And Ross said, no, you're not thinking about getting married here. You just got to, can you put on a suit? You can put on a suit, right? And he goes, yeah, I can put on a suit. And then you go, no, you've just got to, walk to the door. You can walk to the door. Yes, you've got to stand up. You've got to stand up in the front. Can you stand up? And that's the sort of way you're doing it. You're one bite at a time. Go in your shower, turn the thing. And honestly, before you know it, you'll be cold showering. And it will make such a difference so quickly, doesn't it?
Unbelievably quick, literally on the day you do it. So from that, it's a weird thing, but on day one, you feel more alive, alert, better, clearer. As you do it more and more, you get used to it more and more. It genuinely improves and improves all the time. It's a great thing. What about the reverse of that and using heat? Are you using heat very much?
Well, yeah, I read somewhere, or somebody told me, maybe you told me, that if you do weight training, no, I tell you who told me this. Chloe Madeley told me this, and she's fit as anything, and I think she works as a personal trainer as well, or certainly has them. And she's married to James Haskell, who England rugby player.
I know him very well, yeah.
She told me that if you do saunas with weight training, depending on how often you do them, it can be up to between 2 and 16 times. It can make your training 2 and 16 times more effective. And I went out and I bought a sauna blanket, but it's just quite an uncomfortable thing. And where do you lay it out? And so what I do is I go in the hot bath, and I sort of hope that's doing the same job, but probably it isn't.
It's not quite as good. Yeah, so it does something. There's some sort of dilation of blood vessels, and that happens in there, which is sort of fine. The reason why using sauna, and especially infrared saunaing, is good for you is that it has this very penetrative effect into your body. So the dilation of the blood vessels is much greater. Studies show that going into a sauna, in fact, they haven't even done the tests on infrared, but we know it's better, but going into just regular saunas has a cardiovascular effect on your system. So it's like doing mild cardio training if you're in there for 15, 20 minutes, the right temperature. So there's a very positive effect that it has. Some sort of shedding of the excess proteins your body produces as well. It's a cleansing effect to a degree. But more, it's the dilation of blood vessels, that circulation increase, and the very small challenge to your heart that's positive. So alongside everything else, if you have time or the ability to go and use them, it's worth adding in for sure, as is hyperbaric chambering. So this is where you go into a hyperbaric chamber, so an oxygen unit, pressurized, you have this high feed of oxygen. That's been shown to, again, increase our ability to recover from these intensive bouts of long running or intensity of anything, recovers from any sort of injury. And it seems that research is showing that we increase our telomere length. Telomeres are these caps on our chromosomes that sort of define how long we're going to live for to a degree. And it's shown that doing the right approach with that for 8 weeks might improve the length of those, equivalent to adding 10 to 20 years duration to our life. So we're finding ways to actually improve our longevity, to improve our performance, to improve our recovery. Lots of good stuff in there. So we get to the point where we can start to, in our 40s and 50s and beyond, stay really vital on it. And actually, as you do, you feel better now than ever, which is great. Are you taking any supplements right now?
I do take magnesium.
Which version of it do you know?
Magnesium. It's. I've got it probably on my phone here. It's whatever I get from Amazon. There was one that I got that my wife gets. She gets magnesium and calcium and I think zinc or something like that all together. And I tried that and it didn't work for me at all. But then
this is to help you try and sleep. Ideally, this is your goal.
Yeah, I have it before bed.
So the one to take this, the exact one to go for magnesium is magnesium 3-8. So magnesium 3-8, it's a very specific magnesium compound.
Okay.
It's been shown from research out of Stanford, mainly. I know Andrew Huberman talks about this quite a lot. The magnesium 3-8 is specifically good for improving your sleep quality, getting into those 3 cycles of sleep. And I've tried it for the last 6-7 months. I have to say, it's probably the best thing I've come across as being a supplement to get you to sleep better and for longer and wake up feeling much more energized and awake and healthier. So that's worth taking for sure, without question.
How do I know whether it's magnesium 3-8? Mine just says Vitabiotics Ultra Magnesium Tablets.
Yeah, that won't be it. So there's good magnesium, that's fine, but you need to go for the 3-8 is a very specific one. So I'm going to let you kind of do an Amazon purchase on that one. It's definitely worth taking for sure. So
C-8.
3-8. T-H-R-E-O-N-A-T-E.
Oh, 3-8. There you go. Okay, I'll give that a go. Thank
you.
That's
the stuff. That's the good stuff. There you go. You're solved. Sleeping sorted. And I know you're vegan, aren't you now? You're still vegan. I mean, you changed to being vegan a few years ago. Have you stayed vegan?
I am pretty much largely plant-based. I will occasionally, if someone gives me a cup of tea with milk in it, I won't throw it in their face. If somebody's, made something with cheese in it, it's okay. I won't, under any circumstances, eat meat.
Is this an ethical thing or is it a health thing? Or both?
Do you know what it is? I started doing yoga in 2018, and maybe yoga above everything else makes you sort of much more aware of your body, or it certainly made me more aware of my body, and I just stopped wanting to eat flesh. So it's not. I mean, yes, I've since found out how chickens are killed and things, and I don't want any part of that. But it wasn't for that. It was just because I didn't want to. I didn't want to ingest, the flesh of something else. It didn't feel right. And I feel great without eating meat, so I sort of continued.
Did you notice any performance changes by changing to being vegan when you were running?
You see, I really looked out for them. When I gave up dairy and all of this, and I thought, well, am I gonna, is my skin gonna feel better? All of this. And I don't think so. I certainly didn't notice any negatives. I did. I ran a very easy 3:01 marathon, which seems quite sort of counterintuitive in that year, that first 6 months of turning plant-based. So maybe yes, actually, but I'm not a sort of Novak Djokovic, Scott Jurek. We come back to Scott. He's famously plant-based, and he's one of the greatest endurance runners of all time. They both say that they credit their veganism with their athletic ability. I'm not in that camp, but I'm on my way.
You're convinced about the benefits. So, I mean, the school of thinking, certainly, and in chatting with Professor Tim Spector, you'll know Tim, he's the Zoe stuff, and he's based out of King's College, one of the best epidemiologists and great gut specialists of the country. And his view in asking the questions about the same area was that we definitely have to shift towards a high plant base in our diets, probably 80%, 85%, and the rest come largely from fish, if it's going to be the additional animal-based proteins outside of that. But the key thing is, what you've probably done with your vegan eating, as most people do, is you've just increased your diversity. So increasing your range of foods you've gone for, you're adding in whole bunch of other possibilities of microbes into your gut. And in doing that, your digestion then improves. You're getting probably better fiber sources into your gut, different branch chain amino acids that you're covering off by having the plant-based foods. And all of that all adds towards the ability to utilize energy you're giving yourself, increase your immune system enormously, and all of that helps your performance in general and your hormone health in general as well. So there's loads of spin-on good effects of this without question. And we all saw it a few years ago, the Game Changers documentary. I think for lots of people made them really try this out. For most guys, it was a case of we heard there was better sexual performance in there, and everyone's like, I'm in, that's it, we're going to do it. And actually, the truth is, what it does is for most people, it just gives you a bit more carbohydrate probably than you had before. So you feel a bit more energized. Nothing wrong with that. That's totally okay. It's how you balance out the entire process. And for most people trying vegan eating, they stop because there's just a lack of choice for them, because it takes some time and some work to make it work. But if you put the work in, it's better for sure. So there's a way you have to put the effort in, get the product, and then it's better.
I'm not convinced that occasionally as a treat we'll have bacon, like these fake bacon rashers. I'm pretty sure that is worse for me than actual bacon. I mean, it couldn't look more processed, but that's like saying a chocolate bar. I'm not eating it as a health food. Once you're aware that not all vegan food is healthy food, all of the fake stuff is still fake stuff, and it's as bad as any fake stuff. Just because it hasn't got meat in it doesn't make it healthy. But we do, you'll know Dr. Megan Rossi, who's the kind of the gut microbiome expert. She's come in a few times to the studio with her various books, and her latest thing is, as you say, just get more diversity. She says get 30 different grains and pulses and legumes on your plate in a week. If you can get 30 in a week, you're doing just giving your gut a chance. 30
a week, 60, 70 a year of variation. There are tribes in Africa that have 300-400 types of variation in their plant types, which is extraordinary. And they have no incidence of diabetes, very low incidence of cancer, no heart disease. So we know there's something quite good going on in having diversity into our system for sure, without question. Which is vital, really vital. Actually, interesting dilemma for you coming up. The dilemma we're going to have over meat eating with cellular grown meat. Yeah. So this is the next thing coming up very, very soon. And Jim Mellon, who's a big investor in this area, I was chatting to him recently. And this is going to happen. In the next 3, 4, 5 years, it will become mainstream. In 10 years' time, it's going to change things completely. His view is actually that dairy farming is going to disappear in 10 years' time. Would you eat that's going to be, it's meat. It's based on cells that are harvested from a cow, and then they can grow this meat. It still is meat. It still is an animal, but it's not. There's no. Yeah, exactly.
I think I would.
For the environmental effects, it's phenomenal. It saves 95% of the water, 98% of the electricity use, 98% of the land use, all saved. 70% less methane emission. I mean, it's just. There's no reason to not do it. It's just a phenomenal change, and it's coming to us all very soon.
Yeah, my wife says I should occasionally eat a fillet steak because I've always been anemic, which means a lack of iron in the blood. And sometimes she says she can see, back in the days when I used to eat meat, she'd say, "Oh, you haven't had a fillet steak for ages," and she'd see like the colour return to me just by eating this. Sure. And if I was going to eat anything, it definitely wouldn't be chicken. I wouldn't mess about with it. If you gave me an absolutely organic, fillet steak, and I've tried actually. My son sometimes hasn't, and he sort of gets there, and I think, oh, I don't want it. But if it was grown in a lab, yeah, absolutely, bring it on. And I miss the taste as well. So yeah, lovely. Hurry up! Tell Jim to hurry up.
Well, right now, burgers cost around £200 a burger, but they're going to be coming to normal prices soon, and then that's going to be a real game changer for sure. Vassos, we're out of time. It's been great to hear about your training changes over time. And great to see the journey. I mean, it's great to see you from having known when you started doing the running, having achieved so much with it all. It's absolutely fabulous. Great, really good. You're looking really healthy, really well. It's good to see.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's been fun.